In this video, we're going to look at extending the views that are built into Django-allauth and implementing some custom functionality on the pages that are displayed on those views. So previously in this series, we looked at customizing Django-allauth forms. We're now going to move on to views and templates, and we're going to see later on how we can extend and implement custom templates. So more on that later on. After this video, we're going to move on to social authentication and start looking at how to authenticate using external providers like Google and so on. Now before we start, if you want to support the channel, check out our Ko-fi page. I'll leave a link to that just below the video. We also have a link to this Django-allauth series in the top comment. And if you want to support the channel by becoming a member, check out our memberships page as well. And thank you to everyone that's joined the channel so far. Let's now get started. Now the accounts application has some built-in views such as the login view, the sign up view and so on. And it's very easy to extend these views. We can create our own class-based view that inherits from these and then implement the custom functionality and then point our URL to that class. So in this video, we're going to create a custom view that overrides the sign up view. And we're going to add some Django messages to the response and also see how we can add additional context and then use that in our own custom templates. So we're going to extend the built-in Django-allauth templates later in the video. Now let's get started. We're going to go to views.py. At the moment we have these two simple views in the application. We're now going to override the sign up view. So to start with, at the top here, let's bring some imports in. We're going to import Django's messages framework, and we'll see what that does later on in the video. And from Django-allauth's views module, we're going to import the sign up view. That's what we're going to extend in a second. And we also import the app settings. So let's now create our custom view class. So we're going to call this custom sign up view, and it's going to inherit from that sign up view that we imported from allauth.accounts. And that means that all of the functionality that we've seen working when we submitted the sign up form is still going to work. So everything from that is inherited here, but what we can do is override certain class-based methods that are part of this form. For example, if we want to customize the workflow when the form is valid and submitted, we can override this form valid method here. And when we call the superclass's form valid method, it's going to handle saving that new user to the database. But what we can do here is implement any custom logic before we actually save the user, and then after we save the user to the database. So instead of just returning, I'm going to get a response here, and we can get that by calling the superclass's form valid method. And if you need to add any custom logic before saving the user object, you can do that above. What we're going to do is add some messages to the response. So we've imported Django's messages module at the top. This allows you to add a one-time flash message to the response. That is then seen by the user on the next page, but it's not seen anywhere after that. That's called a flash message, and Django has good support for this. Now I also want to show how to use the app settings from allauth.account. So let's create an if statement here. At this point, we've saved the user to the database, and we can now check the settings before we determine which message to send to the user. So let's check the email_verification setting. Now, if we go to settings.py, notice that account email verification is set to optional. So that means that the verification email will be sent, but it doesn't need to be verified before the user can log in. It's optional. We can check if the email verification setting is equal to the following. So we're going to look at app settings. And if we actually inspect what's in this module here, this is part of the Django-allauth source code. We're going to look at this email verification method, which is an enum, and we're going to check if it's equal to mandatory. So let's go back to views.py, and we're going to check if the email verification method is set to mandatory. And if it's mandatory, we can then take the messages framework from Django and we can send an info flash message back to the user. And the first argument that we need to pass into any messages.info or warning or success method is the request object. In a class-based view in Django, you can get that with self.request. And the second argument here is the message. So if email verification is mandatory, we want to send the following message. We've sent you an email to verify your account. Please check your inbox. Remember, when it's mandatory, they can't log in until they actually verify their email. Otherwise, if the email verification setting is optional or turned off, what we can do is use messages.success, and this time we can send a success message back to the user. The same signature here, we send the request in as the first parameter. And let's add the message as the second parameter. So we have a welcome message here with the user's name, and that tells them their account has been created. So that's a pretty simple way to override the sign up view. We've overridden the form valid method to customize what happens when the form is successfully submitted. And we got this response here when we called the superclass's form valid. that is what should actually be returned from this particular method. So let's return that response. Now, how do we actually tell django-allauth to use the custom signup view? What we're going to do is create a URL here, and we're going to go to the project URL configuration, and that's in this module here. And this is where we included the allauth URLs in a previous video. So at the top here, what we want to do is import our custom signup view. And then just before we included the django-allauth URLs, what we're going to do is just paste in this path here. So make sure you do that before you include the allauth URLs if you're overriding any of them. So we have the same URL here, /accounts/signup, and then we reference our custom signup view in order to actually use that view instead of the built-in signup view. Now we can save urls.py, and we're going to test this out in a second, but there is one more step we need to include here. So what we've done here is add some messages to the response after a user signs up. The user is then logged in after they sign up. So what we're going to do is go to the login page. And by login page, what I mean here is the login redirect URL. It sends the user to this secret page. So that's where they go after they are logged in. And that's the page where these messages are going to be displayed, but we need to tell secret.html to actually display these messages. Now, when you use the messages framework in Django using messages.info, messages.success, and so on, what happens is that in the template, we have access to a messages context variable, and that will be an iterable if it's populated, and then we can loop over those and render out all of the messages on the page. So what I'm going to do is just paste this in here. So we check to see if we have any messages on the secret page. If we do, we then iterate over each message that we have, and we simply render that out in a paragraph. So this is not the most attractive messages that we're going to see here, but it is going to display them hopefully when the user signs up. So let's go back to our sign up form in the application, and I'm going to fill this form out with some data. So we're now on the 9th iteration of John Doe. Let's click sign up and see what happens when we're redirected to the secret page. So we're now on the secret page, and notice this message that's been displayed here. Welcome John, your account has been created. And if we go back to views.py, this was the message in the messages.success call that we had in this else block. Now we know that the email verification method is set to optional. If we go to settings.py, you can see that here. And what that means is that this else block is going to be called, and that adds the success message, which we then get on secret.html. And we can see that being displayed on the page here. So that's how we've customized the django-allauth built-in view. We've extended that to add some messages to the response. And notice as well, there are additional messages that come built in with the sign up view. We get notified that a confirmation email has been sent. So that's built in. We didn't add that. It just comes out of the box. And also this successful sign in, that also comes out of the box. And that highlights the point that we have here. If we go back to secret.html, the messages that we have, we can actually iterate over those. So there can be multiple messages as part of a response. But if we go back to the secret page and refresh the page, they are no longer there on subsequent requests. Now, if you want to know more about Django's messages framework, let me know in the comments and we might do a video on that. Let's now move on. I want to show a few additional things in this video. I want to see how we can add custom context data to a sign up view. And by extension, these will work with all of the built-in views in django-allauth if you need to extend them. And by adding custom context, we're also going to see how we can customize the templates in order to actually display additional information. So if we log out of this application and go to the sign up page, you can see the template here. It's not the most attractive, and we might want to display additional information. For example, we might want some call to action here to encourage our users to sign up for the application. So we would need to override the built-in templates to actually provide that. Let's now see an approach for how we can do that. Now, to begin with, I'm going to go back to views.py, and we have our custom sign up view here. Let's say we wanted to add some additional context that should be displayed on the template. Now, what I'm going to do just above the form valid method is define another class-based method in Django, and that's getContextData. And you can see it's been filled in automatically here. So we're going to get the built-in default context by calling super.getContextData. And then we're going to create a custom message. So to the context, let's create a key here called custom_message. And we're going to set that to a value here that I'm going to paste in. So we have this custom message to encourage users to sign up. Join 10,000 plus visionary innovators using our cutting-edge, AI-powered, blockchain-enabled, cloud-native platform to disrupt the paradigm and synergize exponential growth. So that sounds really good. Everyone's going to want to join up when they read that. So we have this custom message. It's essential that we have that on the sign up page. And of course, now that that's in the context, we need some way of displaying it. But we currently have this built-in template and we don't have any customization over that at the moment. Now remember, the context that we have here that we want to show is going to be on this django-allauth template. That's unlike the messages that we saw earlier on. The messages are shown in the next page after the response, and that was the secret page which we had control over the HTML. But this is a built-in django-allauth sign-up template, so how do we actually extend this? Now there is one very easy way to do this. We can actually take the sign-up view here, and we can use a field on the class-based view. And that's this field here. It's called template name, and we could set that to a custom template. That would work, but there are some benefits in using the ones that come with django-allauth and either overriding those or styling the built-in templates using tools provided by django-allauth. We're going to look at some of them at the end of the video. Now, there's a useful page in the documentation on templates here. So the templates, as it says here, that are offered out of the box, they're intentionally very plain and without any styling. And that's because, of course, they don't want to pick a CSS framework. There's tons of options out there these days. So they keep it as plain as possible and allow you to override them or extend them with your own styles. So the two approaches, broadly speaking, are to override the built-in templates, or what you can also do is style the existing templates. We'll look at that later in the video. I'm going to start with overriding the built-in templates. So when you install the Allauth app, it includes all of its templates, and those can be found in an allauth/templates directory. And for the accounts application, if we go down here, you have an account folder that contains the templates from allauth.account. So what I'm going to do is open up the django-allauth GitHub page. And on this, we can look at the source code for django-allauth. And if we go down to the templates section here, you can see we have templates for the account application, as well as the Allauth templates themselves. And we have additional templates for IDP and OIDC for multi-factor authentication, social account, and so on. What we're going to do to begin with is look at the sign-up template, and that is in the account application. So if we go down to signup.html, we can look at the code that comes built into this template. And actually what we can do is copy this. So we're going to copy this file here, and we can then create the template inside our own template system. So if we go back to the application, inside this core app here, we already have a templates directory. What we need to do is create a new folder here called account. And it's very important you get this right here. It has to match the template names and the folders that are provided by django-allauth. So we have an account folder, and we're going to create signup.html. So that is going to mimic the structure here. We have an account and then a signup.html template within that. And inside the template, I'm just going to paste all of the code that we have here. And if we go to the top here, I'm going to change this header here. Let's say signups instead. And if we go back to the application and refresh this page, notice that that has now updated. So that is now the template that is being used. And we have this very professional header at the top of the page now. We're going to change that back because, let's face it, that is terrible. And what we're going to do now is try and add our custom message to this page. So how do we do that? Let's go back to signup.html. And by the way, there's a lot of different template tags here that you might not recognize. They come from django-allauth themselves, such as the element template tag, setVar, and there's a few others I think here. There's one here called slot. Now we're going to explain some of those a bit later on, but here's the text here that says already have an account, and you can see that at the top here just underneath the header. Now I'm going to try and add our custom context just above this here. So what we can do is just create a bit of space here, and we're going to add a paragraph tag, nothing fancy here. And if we go to views.py and look at the getContextData method, we had this custom context variable called custom message. So we can render that out here using standard Django template syntax, and let's close off the paragraph. So now if we go back to the page and refresh this page, notice we have this message appearing just above this section here. And that encourages people that want to sign up and synergize exponential growth and so on. They have this message here, so they can therefore do so. Now, just to reiterate what's happened here, we have created a signup.html template, and we've got a template structure here, a folder structure that matches what comes with django-allauth. Now this is known as overriding the template. We've copied it down and we've changed it as we needed to, but there is also a way that you can customize the styles without extending these, or without overriding these templates, sorry. We're going to look at that in a second. Now one common approach that I've seen before is to actually take all of the templates that are part of the account application, and you can actually download all of these and place them into your template system, and then you can override them as you need to. Now we've just copied one over, and that was signup.html, and we saw how we could actually use that to display our own messages and add context and so on. And of course the big power that you have here is that you can then style these as you wish. So for example, we can add a style tag here, and let's say font size, and we'll set that to 40 pixels just for demonstration. We can now go back here and notice that this important message is now blown up. And that's what you really want to do when you extend these templates. Add your own text and also customize the styles, because it is very basic by default. So as I said, you can actually download all of the templates and customize the ones that you need to. And another way to do this is to use this package here that I'm going to do a video on later in the series, django-allauth UI. It provides nice looking templates for django-allauth out of the box when you actually install this package. So we'll look at that later on, but let's close that off for now. What we're going to do just to finish the video is go back to this documentation, and there's actually a way you can style the existing templates as well. So the ones that come built in, instead of copying all of those over, there's a mechanism included in django-allauth that allows you to adjust the look and the feel of all templates by only overriding a few core templates. So that allows you to achieve visual results, but it's more limited compared to actually styling the templates yourself, and it limits your ability to actually add custom content as well. But let's have a look just now and see how we can do this. Now if you'd like a more detailed video on this, let me know in the comments. But I'm going to take a look at this elements section here. So basically django-allauth provides this special element template tag, and these have an associated template. For example, the header1 element has this allauth/elements/header1.html template, and out of the box that just contains this here. But if we wanted to customize all of the H1 elements in all of the templates provided by django-allauth, we can actually just override this and provide our own template. And then anywhere in the built-in templates where django-allauth sees that element, for example here in the signup.html, we had the signup header here, and notice that it's using that element. What it actually will then do is substitute the header 1 for what's in that custom template that you can override. And again, we can go back to GitHub here and we can have a look at what's provided out of the box in the allauth subdirectory of templates. And notice we have elements and layouts. If we click elements here, we have all of the different elements that are provided and are part of the built-in templates. We can override all of these. For example, if we wanted to override buttons, if we wanted to override fields and how they look, and so on. So we can override the header1.html and then provide our own header 1s that are going to be used across the templates. Let's now see an example of that. We're going to go back to the core application, and under the templates directory, let's create a new subdirectory called allauth and another subdirectory called elements. And then within there, we can provide our overrides, for example, h1.html for header 1 tags. And the way to do this, if we go back to the documentation here, there's an example here. One thing we do need to do is load the allauth tags. So we can do that at the top here. Let's do that just now. And then we can provide our own code, our own implementation of an h1 tag that's going to be used across the django-allauth templates. So let's say we have a header 1 here and we're going to inline some styles. Let's say font size of 30 pixels. And we could also give this a color. Let's say light coral for some reason. We're going to give it that color here. And finally, text-decoration. And we're going to set that to underline. So that's our header 1 styles, and then we can use the allauth slot tag, and that allows the content to be slotted into that element there, and don't forget the end slot as well, and close off the h1 tag. Now let's see if that's had any effect at all. Let's go back to our application, and we're going to go back to this sign up page here. Now this is the header 1. If we refresh this page, notice that it has changed. And if we go to other pages, for example, the sign in page, which we haven't touched at all, we didn't override that template in any way. Notice now that the sign in header is also present here. And if we log in with John Doe iteration 8, we get taken to this page, and notice the header on all subsequent pages that are part of django-allauth has the styles that we applied inside this little template that we defined here. So that's how you can actually extend the styles without overriding the templates entirely. You have access to these elements that you can extend, and there's also similar functionality for layouts. This is less customizable than just overriding the entire template, but it could be useful in certain scenarios. And that is pretty much going to be it for this one. We've shown some sign-up customization. If we go to views.py, we showed how to override one of the built-in views in django-allauth's accounts application. And we showed how to, for example, add context data and also to override the form valid in order to add messages to the response. And you can override any of these to implement your own custom logic that could be part of authentication workflows. And we also saw how we can extend templates that are built into django-allauth and, for example, add our own custom calls to action and also override pieces or elements of the built-in templates. For example, here, the header1 template. So django-allauth forms and views can be extended to customize the behavior and the fields that are involved. And of course, these templates can be customized to use CSS frameworks. It could be Tailwind or Bootstrap or so on. So it's all highly customizable. And of course, out of the box, it gives you an enormous amount of functionality. But I think it's useful to dig in and understand how we can extend certain aspects of django-allauth as a package. Now, I could do 100 videos on how to customize django-allauth. There's so much functionality that's built into this package. But hopefully this is giving some idea of how you might want to customize things in the accounts application. And that's going to help enable you to take the built-in functionality that comes out of the box and extend it with whatever you need for your own needs. So I think in the next video, we're going to move on to social authentication, looking at how to use django-allauth with third-party providers. If there's anything in particular you're interested in, let me know in the comments. And if you want to support the channel, check out our Ko-fi page. We've got a link to that just below the video. And thanks very much to everyone that's contributed to that. It's greatly appreciated, and we'll see you soon in the next video.